Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. Happy Mother's Day, all you moms out there. My wife, my mother-in-law, my beautiful mom upstairs. And God bless to all of you. I'm glad you're here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have two great guests tonight. We have Senator Ted Cruz and Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy. Get into some very serious matters there. But before I do, I think it's important with all the media reports coming out of the United States and Israel, many of them not true, to at least get to the basics here. So we, the American people, can communicate what we believe to the capitals all over the world, in the Middle East and here. First of all, let's be clear about what we Americans believe and don't believe. We hate terrorists. We hate terrorist regimes. We despise them. The Middle East is filled with terrorists and terrorist regimes. Americans do not like Iran and the regime that runs it. They're terrorists. They keep threatening to destroy us and our friends, the Israelis. They're trying to get nuclear weapons and put them on intercontinental ballistic missiles. We reject it. I speak for tens of millions of red-blooded Americans. I speak for Christians and Jews and others alike. This is the view of the American people. That's number one. Americans hate Hamas. We hate terrorists, butchers, Nazis. We hate men that kill babies, that decapitate babies, that rape women and burn people alive and attack young teenagers at festivals. We hate them. We despise them. We got real questions about Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia's role in 9/11. And the more that comes out, as the FBI just released some information about 6 to 8 months ago, the worse it looks that Saudi Arabia did in fact have a hand in helping al-Qaeda attack us and kill over 2,000 of our fellow citizens. That's what we Americans reject and believe. We know who the good guys are. 80% of us support the state of Israel, our holy land for Jews and Christians. And most of us despise the terrorist and the terrorist regimes, all of which are one form of dictatorship or another. So that's the foundation. Let's begin there. If only Israel would accept the Palestinian state as a condition of Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, if that's a condition, then who cares if they join the Abraham Accords? Accept a ceasefire with Qatar-funded Hamas, so Hamas, you see, can rebuild and strike Israel again. That's not going to happen, whether Qatar likes it or not. Accept the deal with Iran that does not fully dismantle their nuclear program. That better damn well not happen either. But then we'll have peace in our time if only Israel, the only democracy, will accept its own destruction, will agree to its own suicide with the Hamas terrorists, with the Qatar terrorists, with the Iranian terrorists, and so forth and so on. Then we'll have peace. No, we won't. And there's tens of millions of us who are going to object, and loudly. We are a silent, massive majority. That can change overnight, ladies and gentlemen, and it will change overnight. Saudi Arabia, our new friends. I hope they are, but let's be clear. 9/11 Families United, which serves thousands of families and survivors of the 9/11 terrorist attack, said tonight the release of the 2016 FBI report summarizing the Bureau's long-secret investigation of the Saudi government involvement in supporting the 9/11 hijackers puts to bed any doubts about Saudi complicity in the attacks. And they're going to tell Israel they need a two-state solution? No, you're not. You don't get to tell anybody anything. Even with the unfortunate number of redactions, they write, the report contains a host of bombshell new revelations implicating numerous Saudi government officials in a coordinated effort to mobilize an essential support network for the first arriving 9/11 hijackers. The range of contacts at critical moments among these Saudi government officials, al-Qaeda, and hijackers is stunning. Those are our new friends, the Saudis. How about Qatar? Qatar, which has spent billions of dollars to destroy our colleges and universities. Qatar, that is behind the Marxist, Islamist riots in our streets, the massive anti-Semitism, groups like Students for Justice in Palestine. I want to prove this to you.
We will free Mumia because it is our job to destroy imperialism, destroy the United States, and destroy capitalism and the system of extraction that it relies on to perpetuate itself. And we will do it by organizing in a manner that actively undermines and destabilizes the legitimacy and the power of the state and the power and legitimacy of capitalism.
So Temple University, my alma mater, by the way, put out a statement, part of which reads, "The person is identified in this video as a member of Students for Justice in Palestine. SJP is not a recognized student organization at Temple and remains suspended because of its actions that violated the Student Conduct Code. Good for them." Now, we reached out to this punk, but he didn't respond. By the way, for the anti-Semites out there, did you hear Israel once? Not once. Zionism? No, didn't hear that. Jews? No. Now, we save that for American podcasters and subscribers. We want to talk about Israel and the Jews and that they're dragging us into a war. The war is here. President Trump talks about the enemy within. That's the enemy within, being funded by Qatar, being funded by the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, being funded by Communist China. They're here now, they're on our college campuses, they're in our culture, they're in our newsrooms, they're in the Democrat Party, and they're in a growing little cabal of the Republican Party. They're here right now. That's an example of it. Now, what about these nuclear weapons in Iran? There's a brand new nuclear site that was just uncovered the other day. It's been reported in the media, although barely. Reported by this network, a brand new nuclear site that way into the ground. Their main nuclear site is 350 feet under the ground, so deep that it requires the biggest conventional bombs we have to take them out. And then we hear, but Iran wants a civilian energy program, a domestic nuclear energy program. Do people think we're stupid? We're Americans. We're actually very smart. We were hit by the Islamist Nazis on 9/11. Our embassies were hit by the Islamist Nazis. Our Marine barracks were hit by the Islamist Nazis. We have special forces in the field today to try and protect us from the Islamist Nazis. Terrorism isn't a theory. It's not a maybe. It is an is. It is here. It has hit us. Oh, it's 7,000 miles away, except when it hit us in Manhattan. Now imagine what these fools would do. A nuclear weapon. I don't give a damn if they want nuclear power for domestic energy. Stop lying to us. If that's the case, why are you burying those centrifuges 350 feet under the ground in cement bunkers? Why are you hiding the other nuclear sites? This isn't about domestic energy, a country that's floating in oil and selling it to the communist Chinese. We, the American people, we are smart. We hate terrorists. We hate terrorist regimes. We were hit by Saudi Arabia. Qatar's funding the enemy in our own country. Iran wants to attack us. How do we know? They say so. That's how we know. Now, these are the truths. This is reality. It's not about warmongers or neocons. It's about eyes wide open. You see, millions and millions of you agree with me. Millions of you. Tens of millions of you. You don't agree with the fifth column isolationists. We can manage Iran. No, we can't. Once the genie is out of the box, it's out of the box. Well, Iran would never attack us. Really? They attacked us before. Ask the people in New York City if that's what they think. Ask the people in Northern Virginia if that's what they think. Ask the people in central Pennsylvania. I stand for defending the American people. That's the job of the American government. Congress, the executive branch, all of it. We the people, our national security. What is in our best interest is to make sure they never get the bomb. And stop pussyfooting around with other terrorist organizations and putting pressure on Israel. Israel, you need to commit suicide. No, they don't. No, they shouldn't. And tens of millions of us stand with the United States and Israel, not with Qatar or Hamas or Iran or Saudi Arabia. No, we don't. That's the truth. We have a midterm election coming up in the not-so-distant future. We better damn well win that thing, or we're going to be spending 2 years after that election on subpoenas, on indictments, on charges, on investigations, on impeachment, and the Democrats will destroy our agenda, the tremendous Trump agenda. And it is tremendous. It is historic. But if we play footsies with the enemy because of a small cabal of fifth-column isolationists who don't know anything from anything, who walk around sloganeering like Marxists, forever wars, neocons, like that's a response to Iran that's trying to muscle up with nuclear weapons, we're going to get our asses kicked. That's the truth. I know. I speak to people every day on my radio show. There are millions and millions of them. They agree with me. Now, what if Iran gets nukes? Well, look at this. This comes out of the media. This is just from, when is it? CBS News Thursday. Pakistan accuses India of serious provocation as nuclear-armed neighbors accuse each other of new attacks. They're at swords points with nuclear weapons. That's a problem, don't you think? Look at this, Friday, North Korea. Just this Friday, Seoul, South Korea. North Korea leader Kim Jong supervised tests of short-range ballistic missile systems that simulated nuclear counterstrikes against the U.S. and South Korean forces. Wow. Can you imagine if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, the threats they'll make, the water lanes they'll shut down, everything that they'll be able to do? Should we pass that on to the next generation and the generation after that? Is that what we want, America? I don't think so. We just want to be able to hope that a terrorist regime won't use terrorism against us? And what is this that, you know, if we can get a good deal with them, I forget who said this. I wish I could remember, I would tell you who. If we can get a good deal with them, well, then Iran will join the economic world economy and the people will flourish. Iran is a police state. It's got a massive prison system, torture chambers. It slaughters its dissidents. The people there have risen up twice to try and overthrow that regime, twice, without support from the United States. First under Obama and then Biden. The people want nothing to do with that regime. Let us not pretend that if we can get some deal, that all of a sudden, Iran, the terrorists, oh yes, Khomeini, and the other inbreds, that all of a sudden will be, yes, we would love to be part of your economic system. Oh, yes, yes, yes. This isn't about peace in our time. There's not going to be peace in our time with a nuclear Iran. They're evil. They don't believe in peace. Sometimes there's evil. They're evil. Open your Bible. You'll see. Good versus evil. It's a forever war. I would tell the forever war sloganeers. Not because we want it to be a forever war, because it is a forever war. Now, I want to get on to another subject, but we're going to be monitoring all of this very, very, very closely. Tens of millions of us who up until now have kept pretty damn quiet about it, but not anymore. I want to talk to you about the courts again, because this is disgusting. To listen now to Sotomayor, absolutely disgusting. 220 lawsuits as of today in 100 days against the Trump administration. Unprecedented. No administration's ever seen anything like it. So it's a campaign. It is the collusion of radical left-wing groups, radical left-wing law firms and lawyers, and radical left-wing lawyers appointed as judges. And not only are there over 200 of these cases brought, in fact, 220 lawsuits. As of May 8th of this past week, the president has lost, at least temporarily, 144 of them. Wow, he must be some dictator. No. The tyranny and despotism is in the judiciary. That's where the tyranny and despotism is. Right here. Now, Sotomayor. So these radical left-wing coup judges who've become justices now feel that they can just go public and spew their political opinions in order to try and communicate with the lower court judges, their comrades. Keep it up. Keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't listen to Trump, and they turn on Trump. He's threatening you. He's threatening the independence of the court. Not one of these left-wing justices said a word when the Supreme Court was under attack, when they were talking about adding seats, when they were talking about packing it, when you had left-wingers marching up and down the streets of conservative Supreme Court justices over the Dobbs opinion, when they wouldn't even bring out the marshals to protect them, when Chuck Schumer specifically endangered 2 justices, specifically. Not one of these justices opened their mouths. Only now, because they like what's taking place. That is the evisceration of separation of powers. Sonia Sotomayor, she's the most unethical justice of the bunch. Liberal Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor urged lawyers Thursday night to stand up at a time when the profession is under attack from the Trump administration. Speaking at a meeting hosted by the American Bar Association, boy, do they stink. Just saying. The nation's biggest legal group also said it was an act of solidarity. Act of solidarity. The judges and justices, all unelected, standing together against a president of the United States who won in a landslide. And all the uncertainty that exists, she said at this moment, this is our time to stand up and be heard. Right now, we can't lose the battles we are facing, she added. If you're not used to fighting losing battles, don't become a lawyer. Our job is to stand for the people who can't do it themselves. For me, being here with you is an act of solidarity. Imbecilic. And then, of course, are the comments last week by Jackson. And what's next? The next left-wing justice next week? I want to remind you folks of something. They are way, way out of line. And if clueless John Roberts doesn't do something about it, the United States Congress must, and they must do so soon. I brought to your attention Professor Rollo Berger, the late great Berger, some time ago, and he writes, a common historicist fallacy is to import our 20th century, now 21st century, conception into the minds of the founders. At the adoption of the Constitution, the notion that judges, for example, could make law as an instrument of social change was altogether alien to colonial thinking. Never entered their minds, ever. Then I want to turn to Federalist number 78, written by Hamilton. Whoever attentively considers the different departments of power must perceive, remember this was written to support the Constitution and get it approved in the states, that in a government in which they are separated from each other, the judiciary, from the nature of its functions, will always be the least dangerous to the political rights of the Constitution, because it will be least in a capacity to annoy or to injure them. The executive not only dispenses the honors, but holds the sword of the community. The legislature not only commands the purse, but prescribes the rules by which the duties and rights of every citizen are to be regulated. The judiciary, on the contrary, has no influence over either the sword or the purse, no direction either of the strength or of the wealth of the society, and can take no active resolution whatever. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment. It must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm, even for the efficacy of its judgments. And he goes on to write, it is utterly improper for judges who are about to give lifetime appointments under the Constitution, utterly improper for them to substitute their personal views for that of the representative bodies of the people. Utterly improper. And it's even more than that, as Berger pointed out in his book, and he noted that the judicial role is one of judgment, not will. He cites Judge William Cranch of the Circuit Court for the District of Columbia back in 1803. In a government which is emphatically styled a government of laws, the least possible range ought to be left for the discretion of the judge. The least possible range. Then we have in Ware versus Hilton, 1796, Justice James Iredell, who'd been also a delegate to the Constitutional Convention. This is the Supreme Court. There are considerations of policy, considerations of extreme magnitude, and certainly entirely incompetent to the examination and decision of a court of justice. And it goes on and on and on. Early justices of the court, early state judges on their courts, the Constitutional Convention, the ratification conventions, the Federalist Papers, on and on and on. Basically saying what these lower courts are doing today is tyranny. John Roberts, you may want to read some of this stuff and educate yourself. You are, after all, the Chief Justice of the United States. It's time that you act like it. I'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.